Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and today we're going to be talking about webhooks. So, webhooks is an important concept to understand in this modern world of service-oriented architecture, or SOA. So, back in the old days, right, we owned our own servers, right? The servers might be in an office, the servers may be back at our headquarters or at our own data center. But when you worked for a company, when you did support services for a company, that company, by and large, owned all of the servers. Well, the nice thing is when all of the servers are owned by one organization, you can put them on a single network, so it's very easy for all of those servers to be able to communicate with each other, right? You set up an Active Directory network, all the servers are able to access Active Directory and DNS and DHCP and Exchange services and all of those things because everything is on the same network. You don't have to worry that much about firewalls and routers because even if they exist, and they should exist, you should have a layered network, you're able to configure everything, right? So if one server can't talk to another server, you just tell the IT guys to go fix it. That's how I got into the tech industry. I was just told to go fix it. Many times I didn't even know what the hell I was fixing half the time, right? But here's the problem, right? In the modern world of service-oriented architecture, we don't own the systems that we use anymore. We're not interacting with our own Exchange server. We're interacting with Office 365 or Gmail or something like that. We are not basically making a client-server request of a server that's in our own infrastructure. We're going out somewhere to basically ask for something, again, with API calls, whether it's Twilio to send SMS messages, SendGrid to send emails, Open Weather in order to get what the weather reports are, right? Whenever we make that API call, basically we're using somebody else's system. And so, right, if there's a problem with communication or whatever, we can't just tell them to go change the router or do something like that, right? So that creates an interesting problem when you're building out your systems for basically how everything is going to be able to communicate with each other. Again, this is an important reason why architecture matters. One of the things that I'm so surprised about in the modern world is that so many coders don't understand even the basic concepts of architecture. And again, that's where I understand if you don't really understand reverse DNS or something like that, but some of these architecture concepts, if you don't understand architecture, I'm not sure how you're going to be building out these larger systems. So anyways, normally when we think about things like API calls, basically, you have your server, you have your device, it communicates with the API for one of these service providers, and a response comes back, and that's what you do. Well, the interesting thing is in the IoT world, you get into a bit of a pickle as far as designing your architecture, right? So this right here is the little dev kit I've been playing with from a company called Blues. So basically, this company called Blues, you can buy this dev kit for $100, and it comes with a cellular modem with a GPS on it, and this Arduino dev kit, so you can actually build out IoT devices, add sensors, relays, all of that kind of stuff. This can send information up onto the cell network over to your servers, and then your servers can actually push data to it to make something occur, basically with one of these remote devices. Well, an interesting question becomes, how do I actually, not magically, how do I actually get this to communicate with my server, right? So basically I have this is my little, IoT device. This is able to communicate up to Blue's infrastructure. There's an app or a platform called Note App. So this is able to communicate up to Note App. But then the question is, how does the data get from Note App to my servers so that something can occur? Because for these service-oriented architecture, these API providers, they want to provide you functionality with the least amount of liability possible, right? They do not want your databases running on their infrastructure. They do not want your web servers running on their infrastructure. They sure as hell don't want your Active Directory servers running on their infrastructure. They want, right? If something has to go from their infrastructure to your server, there has to be a way to get that to occur. And how we get to that to occur generally is something called webhooks, where basically what happens is no app, so Blue's system platform that they have, actually sends a post to my server with all the data that is coming from this little IoT device, so that my server can then process it and do whatever it is that it wants to do with it. It can put it into a database, it can send off an email message, it can use an API called a Twilio to do something else, right? But basically, what a webhook is a webhook is that post, the POST. It's that post that goes from their platform to your server so that your server can process the data that's coming from the IoT device. So let's take a look at this from an architecture standpoint. And again, whenever I show you these little architecture examples, just remember these are incredibly simple. I am giving you examples so simple I can sit here and do a YouTube video on them. And so that's why I think it's kind of funny when a lot of coders don't really seem to understand architecture, because it's like, if you don't understand the stuff that I'm talking about here, whew, there's a big world out there. There's a big world. So anyways, right? So we have my little IoT device, right? So I've got my little IoT device. Again, this is actually a little tracking device. It's really cool. It has a GPS built into this thing that is actually shockingly accurate. So yeah, for $100, you too can have your own GPS tracker that will send real-time updates or near real-time updates about people's locations. That's one of the things I'm actually going to be doing. So anyways, okay, so we've got this IoT device, and basically it's able to communicate up to a cell tower, right? So basically, IoT device has the modem that's able to connect up to the cell tower. But then the next question is where does the data go once it's on the network? And so with these folks, with Blues, basically it goes to something called this Note app platform, right? So they have a server sitting somewhere up in the cloud. The IoT device communicates, gets on the cell signal, then from there goes onto the internet and goes to the Note app platform. All of the information that you send from this IoT device basically then gets logged into this Note app platform. It's actually pretty cool. Like I say, for basics, it'll tell you the cell tower you're connected to. It'll tell you your actual GPS location. It'll give you lots of interesting information just by default. That's before you add any fancy sensors or anything. So you got all this stuff here. Okay, so we go from the IoT device to Note app. How do we get it from Note app to our servers, to our system? So we have our servers over here. Again, this is all up in the cloud. And so basically what you do is a post. So if you're used to using HTML forms, you know how you do method equals post in an HTML form? More or less, that's what this webhook is doing, is actually just doing a post of the data that basically they have here in Note app. So it does a post to your server that needs to be on the internet, so some kind of web-based server, then needs to have some type of script to be able to read these post responses. So whether it's PHP, whether it's Python, I'm not sure about Node. I guess a Node can probably read post. But basically, you need some script on your server that can then read this post value coming in and then be able to parse it into the information that you care about: time, GPS location, tower, sensor values, or whatever else, right? Once all that information has been broken out, then the next thing that you need to be thinking about is what the hell to do with it. What are you going to do with it, right? So for me, right, with this particular device, the next project that we're going to be doing for the main Eli, the Computer Guy channel, is a real-time tracker with a Google Map embed, right? So you can use Google Maps. There's actually an API for Google Maps. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking the GPS values from this thing, putting it into a database, and then creating an embedded map so that somebody like an employer or a stalker, let's face it, can be used by anybody, can basically use it to track and actually have this little visual representation. Okay, well, what do we need to do that? So once we have our data, then this needs to go somewhere. It needs to go to a data store. So my favorite data store right now is something called SQLite. Again, SQLite is actually not the best data store for this type of thing, but it's very simple to use. This is SQL, Structured Query Language Relational Database, as easy to use or as easy to configure as a CSV file with all the power of SQL. Anyway, so all of this information will go into a SQL-like database table with, time, lat, lon, and whatever other information that I care about. Now, in order to create that embedded map, what I can do is I can have my web server component. Now, all this may actually be on its own server. I'll figure that out later. So anyways, basically what this web server is going to do is I'm going to say, what is the last location for this particular device? So it'll go up and it'll do a SQL statement to figure out what the last time was. It'll get the lat lon. With the lat lon, it will then make an API call to Google and say, I've got this lat long. I need a map, please. And essentially Google will send back a map, and then it will have the location, X marks the spot of where the person is from what the last known location coming from this little IoT device. Now the cool thing is, again, having something like this SQL database, right, this SQL-like database, I can store lots and lots and lots and lots of records. So when I do an API call, not only can I see where the person currently is, but I can see where they were a minute ago, and a minute before that, 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 and a minute before that. And so I can not only just see their their current location, but I can see the route that they've been taking to do whatever it is that they're going to do. And this, again, is where you start to see very simple. Have I told you how simple this is? A very simple concept of how you start to see architecture in this modern IoT world, right? So we have the IoT device that connects. Again, it has to connect in the network somehow. So with these blues things, they have cell modems. They also just have wireless. So you could just have it so it will only connect whenever it's close to an access point that it knows, right? But it has to be able to connect to the network somehow. Then the data has to get sent up to something. Then once it's at that something, then we use webhooks, right? Or some other way to send that data to our systems. Once that data comes to our systems, we've got to do something with that data. So we got to parse that data. Then we've got to store it into something. Again, do you use SQLite? Do you use Postgres? Do you use MySQL? Do you use MariaDB? Do you use MongoDB? Do you use one of the 50 DBs that all the kids use nowadays, right? It's got to get stored there. And then once you have the data stored, that's just that. Now, what the hell are you going to do with the data, right? So that's where you need a front-end component, right, where the JavaScript folks or the React folks or the Flutter folks, they kind of build this kind of thing. You need that front-end component, then be able to grab the data. But once it has the data, right, just because you have the data, that's not very useful. Okay, I have a bunch of lat long. Can you imagine that? Here, I'm just going to give the CEO lat long. Yeah, this is the lat long of where your employee was a minute ago, and the lat long of where they were 5 minutes ago, the lat long an hour ago. There's going to be numbers. That's going to be useful. No, it's not. All right, so once you got that lat long, once you got those values that are going to your front end, then you have to figure out some way to visualize that so it has value to whoever the hell is looking at it. So again, that's where we're going to make another API call to Google. So Google Maps has their own API for them to be able to present us a map, and so that we can give some nice graphical user interface to our executives so that they're able to track their employees. And so this is an overall concept, and this kind of shows you where webhooks are involved. And basically all webhooks are is that this system, right, this system here, and this may be Note app for Blues, for Twilio will have the system, whatever else. If something comes in, it will send those values as a post, just like an HTML form sends a post to your server, and then your server will process it as a post, just like it would with an HTML form, and then you got the rest of this mess. So now let's give you a bit of a demonstration for how this actually works. This is not an in-depth class. I'm not going to show you all the configurations, but I kind of just want to show you the panels and everything, right? So this is my little IoT device right here. So the cool thing in the modern world is I can power things off of just USB power packs. And so basically right now, I have this powered off of this power pack. It's getting its GPS location. It's taking a stupid string value of basically basically hello world 2. And I think like every 30 seconds, it's sending something up I'm sorry, I guess it's called Note Hub. So Blue's Note Hub. It's sending up these values to Blue's Note Hub, and this is getting logged into their system. So this right here is this company's Blue's Note Hub. This is their platform, their system, right? So if I do a refresh here, basically we can see these are the events for my device. We can see right here, this is when I turn it on, first sync, sensor requested, so on and so forth. And then these are the messages, right? So basically, again, every little bit, basically a message gets sent up. It gives a value for theoretical humidity, it gives a value for temperature, and it just has a message of hello world 2. So this is simulating a sensor and simulating basically string text, and this comes up to Note Hub. So here's the thing, right? Okay, so this thing is plugged in. This is communicating with the cell networks. It's sending data to Note Hub. Now what? Not actually valuable. It's like, well, that's nice. It's good to know that part's working. What do we do next? Well, then we have this thing called routes, right? And I have this test route right here. And basically, we enable this route, and this is for the webhook. So I have a URL. So there's a really cool little service out there. You can go to webhook.site, and basically what this does is anything that you send to it, whether it's post or get, it will just read that value and put it up on the screen. So this can actually be very useful from a troubleshooting standpoint. If you want to make sure data is getting from your device to Note Hub, from Note Hub out, you want to just make sure that's going on, you can use webhook.site to verify that's occurring, basically to find out that there's something wrong with your server. Again, one of the things you need to be thinking about as a new technology professional is the whole troubleshooting system. How do troubleshoot problems? Okay, how do I verify that this is working? Okay, once I verify this is working, how can I verify that it's sending data to Note Hub? Once I do that, how can I verify that Note Hub is actually sending it out, right? By doing these troubleshooting process, right? By having a process for troubleshooting, it makes it a lot easier to figure out what you screwed up. Anyways, right? So basically this is for the webhook. We have a URL, so webhook.site, and this crappy number right here. And basically, a nice thing with webhook.site is it will just give you a web page, a URL that you can go to, and you can use it for 100 requests before it fails out. And so basically, you just go to that site. It gives you the URL, and then you can just use it for testing. Any additional headers or anything, any rate limit you want to put in, things like timeouts, and some information on like data transformation, fleets. So this whole thing with fleets and other stuff in here. Again, one of the things you need to be thinking about when you have IoT devices is when you have one IoT device, it might be really easy to configure and deal with. What happens when you have 1,000? What happens when you have 10,000? What happens when you have 100,000? That's one of the nice things with how Blues does things is you can actually you can subdivide all of your devices into fleets and that kind of stuff to try to manage it. So anyways, everything that goes from events, right, we enable this route. And then as we can see, basically this is showing us a log file of when the data is going out. We can then go to webhook.site. So the webhook.site, that URL that we had in there. And basically we can come here and we can see what our latest post was. So at 10:20, 33 seconds. We can now see this. We have an event, we have a session, we have a device number, we have a product, body, and this is the value that we could be pulling. Humidity is 48.28, message equals hello world 2, temperature equals 27.9375. We have the best latitude, we have the best longitude, we have the best location. It tells us we're in Asheville, North Carolina, and basically this is the information that's being received, right? So from our IoT device sends up that long whole bunch of other information, plus the custom values, humidity, temperature, and our message. That gets sent to Note Hub. Note Hub then has a route. It then does a webhook. to send the values coming in to this particular URL. And just so I don't have to build out a whole system, I'm just showing it to you this here. So Webhook is an entirely different platform. It's owned by other people. It's an entirely different system. This has nothing to do with NodeHub. Basically, think of this as your server. When you send these post values to webhook.site, it will then grab the post values and basically print it out here with nice JSON so you can see what's going on. And as you can see here, even as I've been talking, new values have been coming in. And so that gives you an idea of what webhooks are and how basically they fit in with the overall architecture in this IoT SOA world. So there you go. There is a bit of understanding of what webhooks are and how they fit into modern architecture. Again, basically when you're using SOA, service-oriented architecture, this means APIs. So an API called a Twilio, an API called a Blues, or whatever else like that. Basically, if you send data to those platforms basically need to send the data on. And so again, in the real world, being a technology professional, there's actually a system that you have to figure out in order to do that. And so the system that a lot of these APIs use is simply webhooks. So basically the data comes in to their platform. They take that data, they do a post, they send it as a post value, again, just like an HTML form, to your server. Your server then processes it just like a post value from an HTML form. And then from there, your server does whatever the hell it's going to do. That's going to be its own system. And so, yeah, there you go. With webhooks, again, it's one of those simple things. I know a lot of people out there will be like, Eli, you could tell me what a webhook is within 30 seconds, which is in fact the case. Again, what is a webhook? API platform basically sends a post to the values that come into it to your server. That's a webhook, right? But that doesn't really explain why webhooks matter. And I think trying to diagram all of this out hopefully makes this make a little bit more sense to you. One of the things that I will just tell you that I think is kind of funny, right? In this modern world, everybody's worried about privacy. Ah, that's adorable. People still think they have privacy. Eli, I care about my anonymity. Yeah, well, nobody else does. What I actually kind of think is funny, like building this little thing, right? So this costs like $100. This is a dev kit from Blues. You can just go online and buy it for $100. Basically, their quick start guide. Like, so whenever you get a dev kit, whenever you're going to start building stuff with any language or any technology, there's going to be some kind of quick start guide. And basically, it's the hello world. What is the hello world of the particular technology? I do think it's kind of funny that the hello world for this is basically a tracking device. When you go to the quick start guide, right, at the end of it, after about a half an hour of learning how this works, you too will have a tracking device that actually works pretty well. I just kind of think that's interesting. It's one of those things to put in your head, like with tracking and all that, again, people's privacy and all that kind of thing. Just realize in the modern world, yeah, tracking you is the quick start guide. I didn't create it. I did not create the world we live in. I'm just trying to explain to people how it actually works. So anyways, I enjoyed teaching you folks a little bit about webhooks and a little bit more about this IoT and SOA architecture. I find these concepts very interesting. Again, I have my main channel, so my main channel with 1 million subscribers and all that. Basically, going forward, what I'm doing on the main channel is I'm building out projects to actually show people how you can use technology to solve problems. I feel like so much in the modern world, whether it's education, college education, that type of thing, or people just talking, we talk about technology. It's weird. It's like we talk about technology without actually talking about technology, right? Whether it's AI or quantum computers or IoT. Again, privacy and anonymity and all that kind of stuff, right? We talk about those things, but we don't really talk about those things. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, the main channel, what I'm focused on is actually building out projects to either solve problems or simulate solving problems with these new technologies to give people a better idea of what the hell they actually do, right? You can like it, hopefully, or you can hate it. You can take one of my videos and take it to Congress to prove why something is crap, right? That's fine. What I'm trying to do with the main channel is just show people how this stuff actually works. Because what I find is with the people that, whether they like it or they hate a technology, most of the time they're not actually talking about the technology. They're talking about something else that they basically imagined. Oh, they saw a movie 30 years ago about AI, and so that's what they're worried about. It's like, yeah, but anyways, right? So, anyways, for the main channel, building out these projects, and so we're going to have a lot more of these IoT projects over there, because I think there's some really interesting stuff that you can do with this. Again, you can marry this with artificial intelligence, so you can actually have a hat in Raspberry Pi world. You can create a hat to be able to connect this modem to it. You're going to have a Raspberry Pi 5, so your Raspberry Pi 5 can be doing AI type things. So it can be doing computer vision, it can be doing computer speech, it can be doing other things in processing. And one of the interesting things to be thinking about then is if you have your edge device dealing with AI, how do you communicate back to the end user, right? Because speech, video, audio files or video files or picture files are very large, and they don't actually fit into JSON. JSON is text. So if you have something like this, if you have AI at the edge, and you need it to be able to communicate with the end user, but you got to communicate in JSON. How would you do that? So like one of the things I want to do is basically be able to create like a Pi device that tracks things like face recognition. So it can recognize faces. It could even recognize things about the environment, turn that into JSON values, basically send that to text, and then be able to send that to somebody like a security guard. Right? In quadrant 5, 2 people were seen. One was wearing orange, one was wearing blue. Right? That's not a picture, that's not a video file, but that might be enough information to provide to a security guard so they go out and see what's going on, right? And that's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to do with the main channel. And so that's where, like with things like webhooks and a whole bunch of these other topics, whether it's SQLite or anything, as I build these projects, I'm just simply showing you the technology that I'm using. Or here in this particular channel, I just want to talk about those technologies a little bit more to just give you folks a bit more in-depth understanding of how some of these technologies work. So anyways, hope that makes a damn bit of sense. You ever get to those points in time when you get done talking, you're like, wow, I said a lot of words. I'm not sure they meant anything. Anywho, as always, I enjoyed doing this video and I look forward to seeing the next one.